Yes, sir.
Okay. So guys, today we are going to discuss the remaining concept of ASP.NET Core Basics chapter, like what is webroot folder, what are the different static files, middleware components, how we can configure the default page in ASP.NET Core application, and then I will discuss another built-in middleware component, that is developer exception page middleware component. So these are the four things which is remaining in our ASP.NET Core Basics, and today I will try to complete all these four concepts. The next session will be on Monday, and from Monday we are going to start a new chapter, that is Entity Framework 4, right? So A to Z, right, whatever you need to develop the application using Entity Framework, most of the concept, right, I am going to cover. I'm going to cover both the database as well as code first approach. I'm going to show you the use of data annotation and Fluent API validations, right, and Fluent API configurations. I'm going to show you how to perform bulk operation using a built-in right method which is provided by Entity Framework Core. As well as I'm also going to discuss how you can make use of external packages, right, or third-party libraries to you, right, perform the operations. So tomorrow and Friday no lectures. Yes, actually, right. Tomorrow I think right few parts in India, right, they are celebrating Diwali tomorrow, and in my native place, right, we are celebrating Diwali on Friday, right. So that is the reason why, right. So there is no classes on tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. If possible, I will take sessions on right Sunday and Saturday. That's fine. So, so that is what we are going to discuss right from Monday. Mostly, right, right, I'm trying to write. So it is better to start the new concept, right, like entity framework code from a new session, right. From Monday we are going to start. And guys, right, what I'm saying, please don't put right this unnecessary message on the live session. That is, where are you from, sir? Is this make any sense to discuss in the live session? Be professional, guys. Right, and right, anything related to right time will revise the same, right. So don't put these things in the live session. Anyone related to this thing after the session, right, you can ask and I can apply, right. I'm not going to check the chat window again and again, right. I'm already right told you guys many times, don't put any message in the chat window, and why you guys are putting the same, right, doing the same mistake again and again, I don't know. And what is this, right, where are you from, sir? Ankit, sir, is this make any sense to ask in the live session? We are going to discuss ASP.NET Core concept, not our personal profile. Be professional. So let us start today's session, and we are going to discuss right this concept in our today's class. Right, what is webroot folder, static files, configuring the default page, and the developer exception page middleware right components. So let us proceed and understand this. So first of all, webroot folder. So let us try to understand what is this, right? www root folder. So in MVC, right, application or in web application, this is called as webroot folder. So this is called as webroot folder. So what is the use of this webroot folder? So this webroot folder going to contain the static files of our application. So it is going to contain. I don't understand who is this one putting the message again and again. What is this, Ankit? I'm saying again and again, don't put anything on the chat window. Why you are saying this? Sorry, sir, sure, sir. So
Please
what is this?
apologize, sir.
Right, that is fine, but because right, this is actually disturbing me. Right, you are
I
putting actually
understand.
while
It's
I'm
not
going in a
professional.
flow. Right, while I'm right going in a flow, you are sending one message and I need to go to there and check. That means it is just disturbing me, right? So, so what I'm saying, don't put anything on the chat window. If you want to ask anything, unmute yourself and ask me directly, right?
Sure, sir. Yeah,
So,
thank you.
right, so
Sorry for
this is see, this is not the first time, right? So from day one, saying this thing. I don't want to go and look the chat window again and again. Anybody having any question, unmute yourself and ask me. If you
sure,
guys
sir.
are having some background noises, and if it is related to right ASP.NET core concept, right, what I'm explaining, at that time you can put a message. But these things, right, you should avoid. Be professional. Let's see. So
Okay,
what
sir.
is webroot folder? Right. So webroot folder means this is the www root folder. By default, it is going to the webroot folder. The webroot folder going to contain the static files of our application. So what are the static files? Static files means HTML files, CSS files, JavaScript files, and images. So any HTML, CSS, JavaScript or images, if you want to store, then you need to store inside this webroot folder. And once you store inside this webroot folder, they can access it directly, can be accessed directly by the client. Clear? So what is webroot folder? So webroot folder is the folder in ASP.NET Core Web Application where we can store the static files for our application. And once we store the static files inside the webroot folder, then these static files can be directly accessed by the client, right? And for this to work, right, what we need to do, we need to enable, right? We need to enable static files middleware component. So what is static files middleware component? We'll discuss, right? Static file middleware component, right? We need to register this middleware component into the request processing pipeline. Now the question that should comes to your mind, sir, if I put something outside the webroot folder, can they access it directly by the client? No, they cannot be accessed, right? If you want some static files, and if you want to access that static file by their name, right, through using the browser or some kind of a tools, right? Then they should and they must be stored inside this webroot folder by default. This is the default webroot folder, and from there only it is going to access the static file. If you are storing the static files, right, something like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right, inside some other folder, then they are not going to be solved by default. Clear or not? Yes or no? Anyone
Yes,
having any
Clear,
question?
clear, clear.
Folder. This is the webroot folder where we are going to store the static files, and these files can be directly accessed by the client. But for this too, we need to enable the static file middleware component. Means one middleware component we need to register it into the application processing pipeline. So let us understand, see how we can do this. So for this purpose, right, let me create a new ASP.NET Core web application. Right? So you can create a new, it is taking ASP.NET Core empty project. Give the project name anything you want, right? So go to the projects folder, select the project folder and create the project, and then click on the create button. So this will create the right project for us. Now you can see, guys, remember, if you are creating any Razor Pages application or any ASP.NET Core MVC application, then by default, this www.root folder is going to be created by Visual Studio. By default, this project right folder is going to be created by Visual Studio if we create the project using MVC or Razor Pages template. But for as we are discussing everything from the scratch, let us do the same thing. So what I have done, I have created one empty project, and in empty project by default, this webroot folder is not going to be available. So what I can do is at the project root directory. So what I can do is I can add a folder and I can give the folder name as www.root. And guys, remember, once I give this name, right, you can see this folder is changed to some web symbol or not. Yes or no?
Yes,
yeah,
Right,
yes,
right. But if you look at this proposed, this is a folder. This folder symbol is there. But coming to this web root, www root, which is also called as a web root, this is coming as a global or you can say web symbol. So now any static files, if you want to store in your application, they needs to be stored inside this web root folder if you want them to be accessed directly right by the URL. Clear? Clear or not?
so inside the www root folder, can we create another folder like subfolders?
Yeah, definitely we are going to create. So how we are going to do? See, inside this webroot folder, right, what I can do is I can create a folder called CSS. Inside that CSS folder, all the CSS file I can put. I can create another folder called JS. Inside JS, all the JavaScript file I can put. I can create one lib folder where all the Bootstrap and jQuery, right, third party libraries I can put. I can create one folder called image where I can put all the images, right? So that is possible, right? So this is going to be the root folder. Inside this folder, any subfolder you can create and they can also directly access via the URL, right? For example, let's assume This is my site.js, which is available inside the JS folder. Then how I can access this? First of all, you need to go to your root URL. Then what is your folder name? JS. Inside JS, you have to write site.js. Clear?
No, I didn't get it. You have to go to your root localhost,
See
then
how you are
JS.
accessing the application. I'll show you, right, how to access. If this is
Okay,
not
okay,
clear, I will show you. So this is your local host. This is going to be the port number on which your application is running. This is nothing but your root URL slash. After slash, you have to provide the file name and the static file name, right? Whichever file you want to
okay.
access.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And guys, remember one more thing, right? If you want to use static files, right, then they are not going to be solved by default, right? By default, they are not going to be solved. If you want the static files to be solved directly without any kind of a processing logic, so what you need to do, you need to use one built-in middleware component that is use static files. And this middleware component you need to register in the program class. And this static files, this middleware will enable the application to serve static file directly and without processing any kind of logic. If this is not clear at the moment, don't worry, we'll try to understand, right? So let us proceed and understand this thing, right, with one example. So what I'm going to do is, right, I will show you this example, right? Okay. So what I'm going to do is, let me add one image. I'm adding one image inside this folder. So this is logo.png. Now I want to access this logo.png. So for this purpose, what I need to do, I need to run the application. And here I'm typing logo.png. See, currently you can see I'm not getting this one. Why? I'm getting 404. Why? Because by default, they are not going to be solved. If you want to serve the static files, then what you need to do, you need to enable the static files middleware component for your application. So what is that? Right? To use static files middleware component. So what you need to do, you need to use this app.use static files middleware component, right? Once you use this app.use static files middleware component, now application is ready to serve the static files. Now with these changes, now if we run the application and access this logo.png, then it is going to work. Let's see. So now what I'm doing, logo.png. Am I getting that image? Yes, I'm getting that image. How and why it is possible? Because now when the request is coming for any static files, that request is going to be intercepted by this middleware component, and it is going to check whether the request is coming for some static files or not. If the request is coming for some static files, then it will check, right, whether that static files is available in the webroot folder or not. If it is available in the webroot folder, then that file is going to be served directly from here without doing any kind of further processing. Clear or not?
So when the static files get processed, so the below middlewares will not be executed.
Yes.
Okay.
Clear, guys?
Sir, will that method accept any parameters?
Sorry. Sir, see, you just tell me, if you are going to load any static files, what is the meaning of a parameter sending?
No. For example, I have a www.root folder. There I have CSS and some other JS files. But I don't want all those files in every time. So maybe if it is loading, taking a load to load those files, it might take some time, right? So at that time, I just wanted to test whatever the required files. I need to check that functionality.
So even I'm not getting your query right exactly. Right? For example, right? For example, see, this is just showing this app.use static file. So this is but whatever files I'm loading, this is not the actual, right, what I can say, example. So actual example will come into the picture whenever we are going to create, right, a CSS HTML file, and inside the CSS HTML file, right, we are going to provide reference to many static files. Some CSS we have created, that link we need to provide. Right? For example, right, let me give you some idea, right, so that you will understand. Right, for example, let me develop some MVC project. Right, suppose this is my right. Let me take this one. Not okay. See, this is my page, right? So what is this here? See here, I'm referring to some files, static files. Here you can see I'm referring to some static files or not,
Yes.
right? So in this case, right, whenever the page is going to be load, right, the server web browser will make another request for this one, right? Bootstrap.main.css, site.css, right? So this only going to be possible if static files is enabled for your application.
Okay.
You might have one question, sir, why I'm going to send a different request for loading different CSS file? Is there any better approach is available? Yes, better approach is available. What is that approach? Bundling is there. Minification is there. That is what we are also going to discuss. So the point that what you need to remember, if you want to load any static files, this middleware is mandatory. And these static files, what we are going to load, right? Bootstrap.dist, CSS, whatever we have provided here. If it is not a CDN, that is fine. If it is a CDN link, that is different, right? Because this is not serving from our application. If we are serving some static file from our application, it is mandatory that those static files should be present inside this webroot folder. Getting my point?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Right? So this is how we are going to use. For now, we are just understanding, right, what is webroot folder, what we are going to store, and what is right use static files middleware component. Once we start developing the right MVC application, at that time we are going to use. But at that time, I am not going to discuss, right, why the webroot folder is there, why we are putting the static files inside that webroot folder, how the web browser loading the static files, right? So that concept I'm not going to explain. I'm going to use very frequently those concepts. That is the reason why these are the basic concepts. That's what we need to learn now. Now, guys, remember, right? If we want, right, then we can also modify this webroot folder. Right? What exactly it means? Instead of using this default www.root folder, and we give a different name which is also going to be work, right? Like our webroot folder. Yes, that is also possible. So for understanding that the concept, right, what we need to do is, right, we need to understand the web application options class. So what we need to do, we need to understand the web application options class, right? So you can see there is a class called web application options. And if you go to this class definition, right, then you will see this class contains a few properties. So this class contains few properties, and right, whenever we are hosting our application, right, whenever we are hosting our application, right, means whenever this create builder method host, that create builder host method is going to use this web application options class, right, to create the environment name, whether it is right, what I can say, development environment, product, right, or you can say production environment or staging environment, or if you are sending some argument by, right, by the command line argument, right, those values, right, and what is the application name you provided by default, this is first core web application, what is the content root path, what is the right, what I can say web root path, all this information it is going to use, right, by default it is going to use by using this web application class, right? For example, whatever argument I'm passing that to create builder method. The create builder method going to store those arguments inside this ARGS value. Clear? And this is going to be initialized at the time of web application instance, right? So now you can see second option is that environment name. So using this property, right, we can see what we can do is we can get and set the environment name. Right, by default, right, it is going to take the environment name from the app settings right, sorry, from the launch settings JSON file. Rather than taking from here, right, by default, if you want, right, then you can also provide that environment name using this property. By default, the application name is going to be the whatever name you provided. Now, if you want to give a different name, that is also possible. What you need to do, we need to create an instance of web application uh, right class, and that instance, right, we need to pass to the create builder method. Currently, if you look, this create builder method, it is taking one args object. Now, if you go to the definition, right, another create builder method must be there, which is going to take that web application option instance, right? So definitely it will be there. Okay, let me add collapse to definition. It's you can see create builder method is there, which is also taking the web application options instance. So another overloaded method is there, which is taking the web application option instance. So if you want, you can also use this create builder method, which is taking the argument. Otherwise, what you can do is you can create an instance of a web application options, and you can also pass that web application option here. Clear? Now, this web application option gives you 5 properties: args, environment, application name. Content root path means this is the root of your web application. And the web root path means this is the web root path location, right? So what is your web root path? That path it is going to give by this web root folder. Content root path it is going to provide by the, right, what is your project, right, directory, root directory is, and web root path means this www root directory path it is going to give. So what I'm going to do is, right, before using this web app, right, create builder instance, right, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to show you what are the default values it is taking, right, for creating an web application builder in right instance, and then I will show you how you can modify this value. Clear, guys? What is this
Is
web
it
application option in of class, and what are the information it is storing?
static class?
Sorry?
Is it static? The web application, is it a static class?
So how you
Static.
can say it is a static class? Can I create an instance of a static
Oh,
class?
okay. No. Because you in the variable the builder, you say
You
web
tell me.
application dot.
You just tell me. I have shown you this class in front of you. Is there any static keyword mentioned in the
Okay,
class?
okay. Thank you.
Right?
Nice. Okay.
So this is what. So what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to, okay, right, I'm going to write this statement. So what I have written here, right? So currently I'm not passing any arguments, so I'm not printing that. So what is the current environment name? App.environment.environment name. What is the application name? And you can see, right, whatever here we are passing, it is having both a get and a init means the set accessor. So using get accessor, I can access the value, and using this init, right, we can set the value. Right. So currently what I'm doing here, I'm accessing the value. So first of all, I'm showing you how to access the default value. What default value the application, right, initially using, right, while I'm creating the create builder instance, and then I'll show you how you can overcome this default value. I mean how you can provide your, right, one value. So let me run the application and see what is the default value it is printing. So what is the environment the application is running? Using the development. So currently, if you look at the launch settings.json file, the environment is development, and whatever profile I'm using for all this profile, the environment is development. That is the reason why you can see the environment it is development. What is the application name? So application name is nothing but whatever the name we provided while creating the project, that is fastcore web application. And then you can see there are two things. One is web root path, and another one is content root path. Web root path means it pointing to the folder, right, which is going to contain the static files. And which folder in our application going to contain the static files? www.root. And that is what, right, it is pointing to. Clear? And this is content root path means the project content where it is storing. Now, if you go to the folder structure, right, then it will find this one. So D my project fastcore web application slash fastcore web application. Is that is this it is pointing to? So content root path means where all your application content is going to be stored, all the folder files, right? Whatever that is going to be stored. And the web root path means where is your www root folder, or you can say web root folder where you are going to store the static files. Is that clear, guys?
Yep.
Yes or no?
It's clear.
Yes. Now how we can modify these things. So if you want to modify this thing, right, then what you need to do, you need to create an instance of a web application class. And here you can see args is there, whatever arguments I'm getting, that what I'm setting. Now you just tell me what environment you want to set. I want to set the environment as production, right? I want to set the environment as a production. Now what I want to do, I want to set my right web root path. Web root path, I want to give the web root path as my web root. I want to give a different folder as the root folder, right? And then, right, the content path I don't want to change, right? Wherever it is, I don't want to change. So now instead of a www root folder, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as my web root. So if I'm using my web root, right, it will not change that to a web folder. But for that, if you want to serve this folder as my web root folder, then what you need to do, you need to create an instance of a web application options. And here you need to set, right, which one is going to be your web root folder. And that's what, right, we can set here, right? So once we have done this, then what we need to do, we need to pass this instance, right, to this create builder method. So with these changes right now, whatever settings we have done, right, that what we are again printing here, and this time it should print the right, it should print the environment name as this, web root folder is this. And if you want, right, you can also set the application name. Suppose I want to give a different name, right, for my web application. So this is the name what I am providing here, right? So with these changes, run the application and see whether this is affecting or not. What is the environment name? Production. Why? Because we have set. What is the application name? My web application. This is my web application. Now, what is the web root folder? The root folder is my web root. Now, as this is my web folder, now I can also access the static files right here. Now, if I am writing logo.png, then it should give me the output. Clear? Now what I'm doing, if I'm removing this statement and if I'm using this args, then by default it will look for the web root folder with the name www.root. But as that folder is not available, rather than the static file is available in a different folder, do you think that right the application is going to process the request? No, it will not process. Now if you see what exactly saying, what exactly it is saying.
File not found.
www
Directory not found.
is not.
Directory not.
It's not found, right? So actually it should not give this error. Okay, let me run using IIS Express. It again, this is throwing me some kind of a error. So if you have any static files, this should be present within web root folder. Now, if I change it to www root, then it is going to work. So ideally, right, we are not going to do some changes. Most of the time, this web root folder, right, www root folder is more than sufficient. Clear, guys? If you are changing the folder, then what you need to do? You need to set, right, what is the web root folder using the web application option class, right? For example, something like this. So you have to use this option and then only it is going to work as expected. Now it is going to work. Clear, guys? What is the web root folder? How to create the web root folder? What is the web option class? How we can get the values and how we can set the values? If I want to create a different folder as web root folder, then what are the changes I need to do? Is that clear to everyone?
Yep.
Anyone having any more question?
How to access the image if it is inside a folder, images?
Right, that is very simple, right? In that case, you need to provide that complete folder path, right? For example, right here, right? For example, I'm having this images folder, right? So inside this images folder, let me my image is there. This is what you are asking, right?
Yeah.
Let's say in that case, that in the path you have to provide that images folder path, images slash logo.png. Clear? So in this case, it has direct access to the root folder. From this web root folder, what is the folder structure? That path you need to provide.
Understood.
Clear, guys? How to customize the web option class? Is that clear?
Yep.
So this is right your web root folder. If you want, you can also rename. If you are going to rename, you have to use the other version of the thread builder method, which is taking the web option class, right? And here you need to create an instance of that class, and that instance you need to pass. Right? This is how you can do this. Okay. Clear, everyone? Should I proceed for the next concept? Okay. Yeah. Right. Next, what I'm going to discuss is, right, the next concept is static files middleware component. Guys, give me 1 minute. Okay. So now, guys, what we are going to discuss is
One question.
yes, please,
In
yes,
case
please.
of web API, this
Hmm.
folder won't be
Not
present.
required. It's not
Not
required. What? Yeah. What I'm saying, only if you are developing a web application, not web services.
okay.
Because in a web API, we don't require any static files.
Yeah, true.
In web API, we are communicating with the data that is going to be in the form of a JSON or a XML, right? So we are not
Yeah.
going to return any CSS, JavaScript, and all these things. Right? If you want to return, you need to return them as data, not like some kind of a file extensions. Clear?
Yeah. Thank you.
Is it a right time to ask how to access this image through program rather than through the URL?
Oh, definitely. See, we are just started now. So as we are going to discuss, right, MVC concept, right? I'm going to discuss this concept very frequently, right? If you look at my syllabus, right, definitely you will find one section, right, for file handling, right? So file handling means this is very, very important, right, concept. You can see, okay, not this one, right? So not this one. So I'm going to discuss many things related to file. So not only right how you can access emails, how you can access PDF file, Excel file, export, import, right? Everything, uploading one file, displaying that uploaded file immediately, storing that file into a database, into a folder structure, displaying the file, right? Displaying the image from the database, displaying the image from the right folder structure, uploading multiple files, right? All these things I'm going to discuss, right, with the real-time scenario. Right? How to generate a PDF, how to generate password protected PDF. If you are having one HTML file, how you can convert that HTML into right some PDF format. If you want to send one email with attachment, right? How you can send that email with attachment, email without attachment, right? Email with attachment, again that attachment is going to be a password protected PDF, right? Everything I'm going to discuss, right?
Fine.
And can we have both custom web root folder and this web root folder together in one MVC application?
You just tell me if I'm having two web root folder. And when the request is coming, then the static files middleware
Yeah.
is going to
Okay.
serve that file from which folder.
Mm. Yeah,
right?
that
From
would.
where it is going to start? It
We
will
can
get
use
from
only one static file, this middleware.
one. And right, and that is also by default it is web root folder. If you are setting something else, then you have to use this right my web root right. You
So
have to create an instance of this class, and here you need to set what is the folder, right? If you are customizing, but most of the time this right www.root folder is more than sufficient, right? And right, as a standard, right, we are not going to change this one.
Yeah,
Clear?
got it.
sir,
Yeah.
there is one property like application name there. So where exactly it going to change the application name?
See, for example, right? For example, what is this? The use of this one, right? For example, you are generating some kind of a log, or if you are if you are storing some kind of data in the cache, and in that, and the same cache server is going to store the data of a different application. If you want to differentiate, right, and if you want to add that the cache key, whatever I'm generating, it should be appended with the application name, then in that case, you can make use of this application name, which is set by the right web application option instance. Different application name, and based on the application name, you can easily differentiate. Yes, this key, cache key, is for coming from this application. That cache key is coming from that application. For example, if you are going to log the data into a text file, putting that application name makes sense, right? And by that application name, you can easily identify, yes, this log file is for this application. Clear?
So in the one solution, different application names will be there.
So how many number of project you create? Every project is going to be a different name. Yes or no?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Right? That makes sense. Clear?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Line 9. Line 9. The line 5 and 9, the args, the argument, is it coming from command line?
Usually, so this main method is taking this one, and we have already discussed, right? So how you are going to pass the data from the command line arguments.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So this is right webroot folder, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make you understand the static files middleware components, right? So let me go ahead. Right. So we have already discussed that if we want to serve the static files, then right we need to enable the static files middleware component, that is use static files, and the default directory for static files is the www root folder. And we have already discussed, if we want, we can also change that directory default directory name. And for that purpose, what we need to do, we need to create an instance of web application class, application option class, and we need to set the web root path property, right? So that is what, right? We have already created this folder, and we have also providing this image inside this right the folder, right? Now, if you want to configure, right, if you want to access the application, then what you need to do, you need to use the use static files middleware component, that what we have already discussed, right? So how the static files middleware component works, right? So the point that what you need to remember, right? So right, when the request is sent by the client, right, for example, when the request is coming for some static files, then that request is going to be intercepted by the static files middleware component, and it is going to check whether the request is coming for some static file or not. If it is not for some static file, then it will right navigate, or it will transfer the request to the next middleware component, that is which is registered in the application processing pipeline. If the request is coming for some static files, right, then it will take the right, it will get the file path from the request, and then it will check what is the file path, whatever the user is sending or requesting for. Is that file path is available inside my www root folder or not? If that right, that file path is available inside the webroot folder, right, then what exactly it is going to do? It is going to return that static files to the client without doing any further processing. If the static file is not available, then what exactly it is going to do? It is going to generate 1404 error response message, and that response will come to the client. For example, right now, what I'm going to do, right, I'm running this application and I'm trying to access the logo.png. So how I can access that logo.png? First of all, we need to go to the images folder, and inside this images folder I'm accessing. But if in this case it is no, that this request is for some static file, because this extension, right, this is going to tell this is a static file. Like PNG, he know this is a static file. CSS, he know it is a static file. But now if I'm typing something logo.to, again, in this case also that request is going to be intercepted by the static files middleware component. And it will, right, it will fetch the path as images slash logo.png. And then it is going to check whether this path is available inside this webroot folder or not. And it finds that there is no logo2.png within the images folder. So what exactly it is going to return? It is going to return some 404 error, right? So you can see for right HTTP error 404 it is sending. Clear or not? Yes or no?
Okay.
Now,
Yep.
now, right? So whenever we are serving the static files, as you know, the static files are not going to be changed that frequently. Can we make it as a cache so that the browser will not send a request to the server, rather than he will pick the data, right? Pick the things from the browser cache? Yes, that is possible. So what we need to do? What we need to do means we need to use on prepare response object, and here we need to set that the cache response header cache control is there. So this cache control header, and we have set it to public, and we have set we have specified that the maximum is 1 month, right? So basically what we are telling, so this cache control response header will tell the browser, hey browser, this is a public property, so you can store this right on your right browser, and you can make use that 30 day as the cache. Means what? Means the browser is going to store this content what is written by the application on their machine, right, for the next 30 days. And whenever the request comes again it is going to check the browser cache. If the cache is available, it will pick that cache, right, it will pick the data from the cache and display it, rather than making a request to the server, right? So let us try to understand this thing, right? So what I'm doing here, I'm running the application, I'm opening F12 browser developer tool, and now what I'm doing here, I'm writing images.png. So currently it is returning the data from the, right, what I can say, you can see status code 200, okay, means it is coming from the server. Now if you look at the response header, somewhere you will find this cache control header which is set by the right server cache control, right? If you go further down, you will see, why it is not there.
I think it's up. It's at the top. I think
refresh
so.
the page.
You pass.
Ideally, it should be there in the cache. Okay, let me do one more time. So now you can see this is 304. Yeah, now you can see that cache control header is there. Yes or no?
Yes.
And in this case, it is not modified. Means 304 means it is getting this from the browser cache. Clear? Right now,
The
if you want to see the data, right, somewhere in the, exactly, I just forgot. Okay. So this status code 304 indicate, right, that data, right, it is not coming, right, from the server, rather than it is getting from the cache. And this cache control header, right, it is explicitly tell that the data it is going to store in the cache, right, for some time. So for some time means 30 days. Clear? Ideally,
sir, the
it should,
caching means what that is in the browser itself.
the cache means, you just tell me what you mean by caching. If you know caching, that's fine. If you don't know, then don't worry, right? We are going to discuss caching in detail. Right? This is just using browser caches, right? There are different types of a cache, storing the data on the browser, storing the data on the server, in-memory caching, distributed caching, response caching, right? All these things we are going to discuss. But at this point of time, if you don't know cache, right, I cannot explain the whole caching scenario, right, currently, right? Because we are going to discuss caching in detail, right? But if you know, right, I think most of the guys, right, those who are here, they might be know the concept called why we are using cache and what is exactly cache. If you don't know, then just forget about it, right? For at this point of time, once time will come, I will definitely going to explain the caching concept right in detail. Clear, guys? Right, because caching, right, it is not possible for me to explain the caching concept, right, in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It is going to take minimum, right, 3 to 4 sessions to explain the caching concept, right? So if you are having some idea what do you mean by caching, that's fine. If you don't have any idea, forget about this thing, right? And just continue that, right? Just continue with this concept, right? Just forget these things, right? For now, you can simply forget that there is some huge static files middleware component is there, which is going to enable, right, the static file service for our ASP.NET Core MVC application. Use static files. Clear? Right? Because caching is a very, right, a complicated topic, and I have already, right, provided the syllabus. You can see that, right, we are going to discuss caching in a separate chapter. Definitely, you will find one right section called caching. Caching in ASP.NET Core. So you will discuss, right? I will discuss all these things, right? What is output caching? What is in-memory caching? What is distributed caching, right? What is response caching? All these things we are going to discuss. But for now, if you don't know caching, then just forget about these things. Clear, guys?
Okay, yes.
So for now, just remember there is a middleware component called UseStaticFiles, which enable the static files, right? So that the client can access them directly. And the server is going to process them without, right, doing any kind of a business activities. Once the request is for static files, they are going to be served directly from the webroot folder. Clear, guys?
I just want to know that whether it is it a good practice to keep the files as in a cache memory if the files belongs to the different people.
Right. So what do you mean by different people? Just what do you mean by static file? You just tell me.
Uh,
What do you mean by static data and dynamic data?
Says
Fixed data is a static one.
Fixed data means static data. If the data is not changed, if the data is not specific to someone, then those data you need to consider storing in the cache. If the data is dynamic, which is going to be updated, modified, deleted, right? Very frequently, you should not store them in the cache.
no, say we take an example like an images. Images we are not going to change, but it belongs to a certain person.
Right.
Those who are storing in the folder. Would you like to suggest that it should be used as a
Obviously,
cache
so
memory?
you can store them, right? So whenever you are storing images, right? For each user, right? For each user, let assume the profile picture of a user. And there are, right, a million of users using your application. So do you think that all the user name or all the user images, the name whatever they are going to provide or whatever name you are providing, right? That is going to store in the data, right? In the database or in the folder structure, it's going to be same name or different name or unique name, right? Unique image name for each user or same name.
It will be unique.
So unique means there's no issue, right, storing them in the cache, because whatever the name we are providing, for example, we are providing, right, whatever your name, some unique identifier we have added, and when the request comes for that image, it is going to return.
Understood.
Clear? You understood?
Yeah, understood.
So the name is important, na? So we are not providing the same name for all the users. Every user, whatever the profile picture they are uploading, that name what we are storing in the database or in the folder structure going to be unique. And based on that name only, we need to pick the appropriate image, and that image we need to return to the client. And once that image is returned to the client or browser, it is up to him, right? Whether you want to cache that image. Most of the modern web browser, right? Any static files you provide, most of the modern browser, right? They, right? What I can say, they store them in the right browser cache. Even though we are not enabling cache, they are storing them in the cache, right? For faster, right, retrieval and smooth user experience. Clear?
Sir, do we need to maintain the sequence? Like for example, if we are creating some custom middleware component using app.run or app.use, then this static middleware component has to be in the sequence, or we can write it like in any form.
So did you attend my yesterday session?
Yes.
Then why you are asking this question? So
Like you said that it
that
should be in
sequence, right?
sequence.
That sequence completely, right? What is the sequence that what we need to follow? I have provided in yesterday. Did you go through this diagram what I have provided in the documentations?
Yeah, I have gone through.
Then why you are asking this question? Is this sequence matter or not?
Yeah.
I'm
Got it.
asking you the sequence, right?
Yeah. I got it.
Order
Yeah.
is important or
Sequence
not?
is
Right? We have already discussed this thing, right? And I hope you have not going through this picture or diagram what we have provided.
yeah. Got
Clear?
Yeah.
So just to go through this diagram, whatever explanation I have provided, what is the use of each middleware component, right? So most of the time, whatever middleware components we are going to use, definitely that component, right, going to come from one of this pattern, right? Right. Currently, whatever middleware component we are using, use static file. So this middleware component means this is the static files middleware component. So if I'm going to use HTTPS or exception handler middleware component, means what? When needs to be put before the static files. If I'm going to use routing, authentication, authorization, then needs to be put after the static files. Clear?
Yes. Clear.
Right? So you just need to refer this diagram, right, for knowing what is the proper order, right, of putting all the middleware components into the request processing pipeline. Now, guys, what I'm going to discuss next is, right, we are going to discuss one of the interview question, right? What is right? Use static files. So static files, middleware components. One is default files middleware components. One is directory browsing, right? Middleware component. Right? So in the interview, you will get some questions related to this one. So let us try to understand this concept, right? So this static files middleware component we have already discussed. What is the use of this static files middleware component? Guys, tell me.
Serve the static file.
Right? It is basically going to serve the static files. And what is this default file and directory browsing? Let us try to understand, right? So this is to enable the web application to serve static files, right? So this point is clear now. Now, guys, remember, right? Whenever we develop any application, any web application, when we visit the web page, right, or you can say whenever we visit any website or web application, then by default, one starting page is coming or not. And that page we generally, right, in web application we generally turn as the index page or the default page, right? So, for example, any website you take into consideration. For example, if I'm going to my website, right, .NET tutorials, then what is the first page coming? So this is nothing but my what I can say. This is my index page, right? Similarly, any website you visit, that page is going to become, and that page means if I'm not providing any particular page which I want to access, if I'm only accessing the root URL, then what page I want to display to the user by default, that is nothing but your default page. Right? So that is nothing but your default page. And by default, right? And what we want is in my application, right? I want to create one page called index.html, or you can say you can create our default.html, right? A new one. And what you want is whenever the user visits the page, I want to display this page, right, by default to the user whenever he accesses the root URL of my application. So for that purpose, what I need to do, I need to use something called default page middleware component, which is similar to static file. Static files is to enable static file services. Default page means what? Whenever the user trying to access the application without providing any URL path, only the root URL, then in that case, which page I want to display, that is going to be the default page. Let us try to understand these things, right? So what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to create this index.html. Again, guys, remember this is a static file. So static files means inside which folder I need to create. Let me put one folder right here for the HTML. So let me give the folder name as HTMLs. So inside this HTMLs folder, right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new item. Let's give this name as HTML. And in this case, right, what I'm going to give, I'm providing the name as index.html. So here, let's put a single, it's one tag. This is index page. So now with this pages, run the application, right? So, okay, so instead of displaying this thing, so what I'm going to discuss, written here, hello world. So now let me run the application. So once I run the application, right, then which page is going to display by default? It is displaying hello world. Instead of a hello world, what I want is, I want to display this index page as the default page. If that is your requirement, then what you need to do, you need to use, right, what you need to use index.cshtml. Now, if I see currently it is not showing, but if I access that index, for example, HTML slash index.html, then that page is going to be displayed. Right? Give me one second. Right? So you can see the index page is displaying here. But what is my requirement? My requirement is when I visit the default page, I should need to display that index.html file rather than write this hello world message. If that is your requirement, then what we need to do, we need to set the default page for our application. And to set the default page for our application, what I need to do, I need to use the default files middleware component, right? And this default files middleware component should and must be placed before the use static files middleware component. So with these changes in place right now, run the application and see whether it is working, not working. Why it is not working, that I will show you. But now just move this one, right? What I'm doing. So I'm just moving this index.html file to the root directory of the webroot folder. So what I have done here, so in the webroot folder, right, I have added this index.cshtml file, index.html file. This is not a CSHTML, this is a HTML file, right? So with these changes, run the application, and still I'm not getting the output. So which means what? There is some caching issue. So if you are not getting the output, then what you need to do, just to change the launch profile instead of HTTP, use HTTPS. So once I use HTTPS, run the application. Again, I'm not getting the output. So if I'm not getting the output, definitely there is some issue. Okay. So what I can do is, let me clean the solution. Then again, run the application using a different profile. Let me restart Visual Studio. Ideally, it should work. Okay. Let me restart. Sometimes the caching causes these issues, right? So let me restart. So this is use default files and use static files. Okay, let me remove this images folder also from here. INDX. Okay, that's good. Okay, let me use HTTPS profile and run the application. Might be because of the cache. Okay, let me disable caching. Why it is not working? So this is the default files middleware component, that file. And we have added that right HTML page in the webroot folder, that is also fine. So it should work. Why it is not working? Same thing I have done here. This is the static files. Why it is not working? Let me try to run with IIS Express. Yeah, now it is working. So let me again use HTTPS profile and see whether it is working fine. Yes, it is working. Now it is working, right? So, okay. If I'm using map-get, clear, it is now working. So sometimes what happens now, this is because of the caching issue. Sometimes it will not work, right? Again, it is not working. And right, so I think it is not working because of this map get, right? So instead of a map get, right, what I can do is I can register the component using upfront. So in this case, what will happen? In this case, right, we are explicitly specifying this one, which is specific to one of the endpoint, right? Map get endpoint. So let's forget about map get, which is specifically used for, right, what I can say, a minimal API. So let's try to register the component using raw. So with these changes in place, right, now run the application and see, yes, this is working. The index page is coming. Clear, guys? So in this case, this use default file, exactly what exactly it is going to do, go to the definition and see what exactly it is doing. So enables default file mapping on the current path. And right, so exactly what exactly it is going, files are solved from the specified red path specified from the iHosting environment web root, right? So from the web root path, you will look for a file with the name index.html or right, by default, right, these are the default file it is going to look for: index.html, index.html, default.html, and default.html, right? Any of this file it is going to look inside this web root folder, and if it found, then it will serve that file as the default file. This is the default behavior. Now you might have one question, sir, I don't want to use index.html as the default file. Rather than I want to create a different file, right, and I want to serve that default file as my right default page. Is that possible? Yes, that is possible. So for that purpose, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new item. Again, another HTML content, search for the HTML and create another HTML page. So in this time, what name I have provided, all right, my custom page one.html. Now I want this my custom page one HTML, right, to be my default page, right? So this is, I want this is to be my default page, my custom page one. So I want to make this my custom ones as the default page. With these changes right now, I can access both the pages, right? No doubt about it. I can access this index dot right HTML page. I can also access my custom page dot my custom page one dot HTML, right? That is also possible, right? Okay, so I think I have given something different. Yeah. So this is also working. Now I want to make this page as the default page. If that is your requirement, then what you need to do, you need to use the default file option instance, and you need to set which file is going to be your right, page, right, default page. So for this purpose, what I can do is I can specify, I can create an instance of a default file options class. And then any default file, if it is provided earlier, please clear them and then add whatever the default page you want with. So currently I want to create my custom page one as the default page. So that is what I have provided here. First of all, create an instance of a default file options, then clear any default page if provided earlier, and then set which page is going to be your default page. Once you have done this, then what you need to do, you need to pass this instance as a parameter to this class, use default files. So this is use default file. So default file option instance it is expecting. And using this default file option instance, we need to check which page is going to be my default page. So with these changes, now if I run the application, then my custom page one is going to be the default page, right? So run the application. So I'm getting my custom page one. Now, if you want to access the index page, that's what you can also access, no issue. The index page you can access. But if I'm not providing anything in the URL, then that is the default page what I have specified that is going to be solved. So can anybody tell me what is the difference between these two middleware components? If I'm disabling this one, is it going to solve the default page? Let us try to understand. No, that means that the default file is not working. In this case, this middleware component is going to solve the data. So what is the, what you understand from here? What is the difference between these two?
So default file is part of static file.
So what is the difference? So use default file. The one and only responsibility means what? It is not going to solve the file. It is not going to serve any static file. It is just a URL rewriter. It is just a URL rewriter, which is going to set what is the default page for the application. If the user doesn't provide anything in the URL, then which page is going to be served as the default page?
Default landing page.
Right? So which there are, right? So in that case, whichever page, right, we serve as the default page, that page is going to be served by this use static. So actually, who is serving the page? Static files middleware. And what is the use of this use default file? It is only going to set the default page for your application. He doesn't have the capability or ability to serve the static page. He can only set which one is going to be your default page. And whatever default page you set, that is going to be served by this use static files middleware component. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? So first of all, it is going to set which one is the default page, and then that default page is going to be solved by this use static files middleware component. Another option is there, use directory browsing. So what exactly it means? It means if you want to expose what is the folder structure, right, of your www.root folder or any specific folder. For example, let me add a folder here. Let me provide these images and let me go ahead and add this image, right, logo.png, right, inside this folder, right? So what exactly it means? It means if you want to expose what is your webroot folder structure on the web application, then in that case, what you need to do is you need to use directory browsing middleware component. So let us understand these things, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove these things, and here what I'm doing, use directory browsing. So basically, it will. So when the request comes, right, it is going to create right check whatever the URL. I mean, if it is the root URL, then it is going to inspect the webroot folder. It is going to identify what are the subfolder and what folder is there inside each subfolder. And accordingly, it is going to create one web page. And in that web page also, it will provide the link to access all the static files. If this is not clear, let me run the application and show you this thing. Right? So currently, directory browsing is enabled. So now you can see at the root of this at the root directory means whenever we are accessing the root URL. So inside this root, I mean webroot folder, how many folders and files are there? one file, one folder is there, that is image, and the two files are there, one is index and one is my custom page one. So now you can see this is my images folder and this is my index and the custom page.html. Now from here you can access the resources, right? That is fine. Now from here you can access the resources. Now instead of this thing, right? So what I can do is, right? So if I want to access only the folder structure of images, then what I need to do? In the URL, I need to provide these images. So if I provide images, then it is going to show me the folder structure of this images folder. Whatever the files are there, right? What is there, that what it is going to show you. So this is, guys, remember, this is very sensitive, and this directory browsing should and only be used in the development environment. Why? Because exposing our folder structure, file structure on the production environment to the client make a huge impact on a security breach. So you should right? If you are using directory browsing, it should be on your local development machine. And if you want to identify what is the folder structure, right, and how I can access the right static files, then for that purpose you can make use of this directory browsing. But it should be, but it should not be used on the, right, what I can say, production environment. Clear? What do you mean by directory browsing? Directory browsing means what is your web root folder, that folder structure it is going to display, and based on the current right root path. If you are accessing the root path, then it is going to display the web root folder completely structured. If I'm accessing the image path, it is going to display the image path, right, inside the, right, whatever folder are there, that is what it is going to display. Clear or not?
Yes.
Right, how it is working? Checks the presence of this directory browsing middleware, generate an HTML page showing the files and the directory within the specified folder, list files with links, right, allowing user to download and view the files directly. So this is what it is doing. So what are the things we have discussed? So what is the use of a default page middleware component? Setting the, let's tell me, setting the
Default
Default
URL.
what is directory browsing, right? In right, allowing to view the directory
Directory path.
structure,
File directory structure.
right? Directory structure with links to view the, with links to view the content. Clear? Clear or not?
So this directory browsing will only show the files inside that static folder, right?
Yes, yes. Only web root folder directory structure. You cannot find, right, anything else. Why? And it makes sense. Why? Because right, if I'm using this one only, right, and guys remember, if you are not using UseStaticFiles middleware component, this is not going to be work. Right? Let me run this one. Right. So now I'm accessing. I'm able to access this thing, right, because of the caching. Let me run this one using HTTPS. Again, this is working because of the caching, right? So this caching actually making a right huge impact. So what I can do is, right, I can reload the Visual Studio and then check. Even this is not working.
Maybe because of browser caching.
Yeah, now it is, you can see, right, whenever I'm accessing this thing, right, currently I'm not getting the data, rather than I'm seeing that a default message request generated and handled by the response rather than the actual data. Clear? This is because of the caching, right? Sometimes it will right, cause some kind of process, because the modern web browser, they are very smart. So they are storing the right static file on the browser cache. But now if you see, even with the directory browsing, right, whenever I'm accessing any static files, you can see I'm getting only this message, right? Request handled and response generated, which is nothing but this one, rather than displaying the actual content. Clear?
If you press Control Shift R, it will load.
Yeah, that's when currently I'm not able to see the data. Na? So I'm accessing logo.png. Am I getting that logo?
No.
Right. For example, I'm going to access this index.html. I'm getting that index.html content.
No.
URL is index.html, but what content I'm getting? Whatever the default middleware component that is registered. So this app.useStyle, it is basically going to enable to serve the static files, and this use directory means it is going to give you the folder and file structure with link. If static file is enabled and if you click on that link, then that content is going to be loaded. If static files middleware is not there, the content is not going to be clear. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Now,
So for example, in the default page, sorry, in the web root structure, if we do have the index.html as well as the default.html files, for example, couple of HTML files. So what would be the default we could expect as which
so
one
I have
encounter
already
first?
given that default structure, right? So I have already given that default structure. So in this way, it is going to show. So if index and the default both are there, default will come into the picture,
Sure.
right? Yeah. So this is fine. Now we have understand three middleware component. One is for to enable the static file. Another middleware component for for the setting the default page. Another middleware is there for directory browsing. So now what
I have one
right?
question.
Yes.
Can we use default file middleware and directory browsing middleware same time?
Yes, you can do it. That is what I'm going to show you in some time. Right? For example, right,
Okay.
directory browsing, right? How it both are not going to work, right? Both are not going to work at the same time, right? If you are enabling the directory browsing, then you have to disable the default page middleware component. If default page middleware component is there, then by default that default page is going to be displayed. For example, app dot use default files. I have enabled this one, right? So with these changes, this will not come into the picture, and it makes sense. Clear? If you
Yes.
are using a default file, then whenever you are visiting the root URL, right, and that default file is going to be red display. But now, if I'm accessing that images folder, then the directory structure will come into the picture. Why? Because now, if I'm specifying something in the URL, means we are not going to load the default page. Then in this case, for this one, the directory browsing is there, and that structure is going to be displayed. Clear?
Okay. And their order. So we should
Order means
use default file first, then directory browser.
first of all, you just tell me, do I need to use this in the production?
Yes, we don't need to use.
And if you don't need to use means you can ignore this one.
Okay.
This is only for understanding, right, the folder structure of your web root folder in the development machine, not on the staging or production environment. Because we don't want to expose our folder structure data or everything to the client or anyone who is consuming our application. This is only for a development machine, not for production. These are for the production environment. In the production environment, you just tell me when the user visits the web page, you want to expose this directory structure or you want to display the default page.
Default page.
Obviously, then it should come first. Then this is
Okay.
here. Now, so these three things,
Yes.
these three things, whatever functionality they are providing, we can also achieve, using a single middleware component. So what functionality these three middleware components are provided? These three, we can achieve using a single middleware component that is nothing but your UseFileServer. So using this UseFileServer, we can achieve the functionality of all these things. UseFileServer middleware component. So whatever they have provided, all these things are possible using a single middleware component. Now run the application and see whether it is working fine or not. Yes, default page is loading. Yes, right? Why I'm seeing this one, images is there. Yes, images is there. The point that what you need to remember, right? You can achieve all these things by default, but by default, because of the security region, this directory browsing is visible. And it makes sense. Why? Because, for example, if you use this use file server in the production environment, then by default, it is going to enable the default file and as well as the use static files middleware component. By default, the directory browsing is disabled. Why? Because of the security reason. I don't want to expose the sensitive data. That is the reason why by default directory browsing is disabled. Now you might have one question, sir. Using this file server option, how I can show you use directory browser? As you have already told that using this file server option, who unmute video, right? So how we can achieve this thing? So for that purpose, what I need to do is I need to customize this file server option class. So what I need to do is I need to customize this. So how you can do this customization? Again, you need to use file server option class, and here you need to enable directory browsing. And here the file provider is nothing but your the current web root directory path that what you need to provide. So go to the web right root application directory, and inside this directory, this is the webroot folder. And from this folder, please enable directory browsing. So once you create an instance of this class, then you just need to pass this instance to this file server option class. So with this option, now run the application and it should work as expected. Now, if you see this is working now, and if you click, then you will get this one. Now you might have one question, sir, that is fine, but I don't want to enable this default option page. What I need to do? If you don't want to enable the default page, right, for your application, then what you need to do, you need to clear the default page, right? So how you can do this? So for this purpose, what I can do is file server option, default file names, and clear method. So when I call the clear method, then what exactly it is going to do is any default page which is going to be set by the application, it is going to clear all the default page. Means there is no default page anymore, and as there is no default page anymore, means the default page will not be visible because we are not setting any default page anymore. So we are just clearing all the default files, and we are not setting any new files. Means there is no default page. As there is no default page, now if I run the application, then again it is going to show me the complete directory structure, browsing structure, right? And if you don't want to enable this one, then what you need to do, you need to make this as false. So once you set this as false, right, then in this case, right, there is no, what I can say, directory browsing. There's no default page. If there's no directory browsing and no default page, then the middleware component which we have registered here, that is going to handle the request and that response we are getting here. Clear or not? Now, so now in the interview, you might get this question. Sir, what is the difference between all these four? So you just tell me, use static files. What is the purpose? So when you want to serve the static content without requiring a, right, what I can say, default file or a directory browser. So use static files means, right, it is going to serve the static files directly. Use default files means what? If you want to set a default page for your application, you need to use default files. What is use directory browsing? Use directory browsing means if you want to expose your directory web root folder directory structure, right, then you need to use directory. Use file server option means it is combining all this middleware, right, all these three middleware into a single middleware. Now, if you want to see the difference, use static files purpose to serve static files from a specified path. What is that specified path? Web root folder. What is use default file? Specifies a default file to serve in a directory. Use directory, enable directory browsing. Use file server, combining all these three things. Clear? So if I'm using a use static files, so only static file it is going to serve. It is not going to serve directory browsing and a default file. If I'm using a use default file, then what exactly it is going to do? Right? Default files means a static file it is not going to serve. What is the main purpose of a default file, guys? It is going to set the default file only. Use directory browsing means it is only going to set the directory browsing. So every middleware component have different responsibility. Default file means, see, solving is only going to be done by this one, use static file. Use default file, it is going to set the default page for your application. Use directory browsing enable, right, your application to view the folder structure of your webroot folder, right? And if you are not using static files means your application cannot serve any static content. And use file server, it is combining all these three options into a single middleware component. Clear?
Yes.
Any question, guys? The last thing, right? If no question, then we can proceed for the last concept for today's session. Anyone having any question, guys?
Sir, use default files also serves static files, not just only rewrites the URL.
It's only rewriting the URL, setting the default page, not serving the
But
right.
still it serves a static file, na, sir? Because the index.html is also a static file, na, sir?
No. See, if you are right, okay, say whatever you are asking, let us prove this one. So what I'm doing here, I'm using only use default file. So in this case, do you think that if I'm accessing any page, it is going to serve?
No, it's not.
Right. So let me run the application. It is only going to set the default page, but which page is it is displaying? It is setting the default page as the index.html. But am I getting any response from index.html file? Even though if you direct access the index.html page, then also it is not going to work. Which page it is displaying? The default middleware component which is registered. Now, along with the use default file, if I enable this app static files, then it will work. Why? It is going to set the default file, and that default file is going to be served by the static files middleware component, right? So run the application and see, I'm getting the page. Clear?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Okay, so here, that is the reason why I'm saying static files are no. Directory browsing, no. Only default file setting. Static files means it's only responsibility to serve the static files. So you can say if I'm using any of these use default file, use directory browsing, static files are not going to be served. For serving the static file, you have to use static files middleware component. If you are using file server, that is also fine. Why? Because it is internally right enabling the static files middleware component. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So the last thing, right, what we are going to discuss in today's session is developer exception based middleware component. Guys, remember, whenever we are developing a application, if we are properly handling the exception means we are giving a new life to the project. If we are maintaining proper exception handling, proper validation, right, then on behalf of the developer, the client can also take necessary action. For example, if I'm developing one application, right, and where the client entering some invalid data, for example, email field is there, and the user is providing one invalid email. So if you are giving some kind of a understandable message, right, primary key or foreign key violation in the database, something the client will not understand. Rather than if you are giving that it should be valid email address, it should contain some the format of the email address. For example, user entering the password instead of giving a there is some issue, right? If you are giving a proper meaning, right, what exactly it means, if you are providing the error message, which makes sense, right? You should enter capital letter, small letter, minimum 8 digit special character in the password, right? Then client can understand, yes, I'm doing something wrong, so that he can rectify the mistake and he can provide the valid data and proceed. So exception handling, right, is a mandatory thing in ASP.NET Core web application or any. So forget about ASP.NET Core web application. Any kind of application you take into consideration, right? MVC project, web app project, Razor project, desktop application, console application, web form application, right? Windows application, any project you take into consideration. If you are not writing proper exception handling code, means your application is not going to be accepted by the client. Handling exception is mandatory things, but sometimes what happens as a developer, at some point of time, we forgot to handle some of the exception. That means, so whenever we are developing any kind of application, right, any kind of application, so there is a chance, right, whenever we are developing any kind of application, there is a chance that the application is going to throw some unhandled exception. If you are writing the try catch block, within the try block, if the exception is thrown, then the catch block is going to handle that exception. But it is also possible that some of the time, right, we are not writing any try catch block, we started writing the code directly. If you are writing the code directly without using try catch block, if that code is going to throw some kind of exception at runtime, that means that exception is said to be a unhandled exception. Clear? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
What do you mean by unhandled exception? If an exception thrown at runtime, if that exception is not handled by the application using try catch block, then we can call that exception as unhandled exception. And whenever there is an unhandled exception, what we need to do? So in that case, right, ASP.NET Core application, right, specifically in ASP.NET Core, right, these things are going to be in ASP.NET Core. So what the ASP.NET Core does? What ASP.NET Core does for unhandled exception? What ASP.NET Core does for unhandled exception? So in this case, ASP.NET Core going to check what is the environment. What is the environment? If the environment is development, so the detailed, right, so the detailed exception information. Clear? Other than environment, not development, so a generic 500 internal server page. Without exposing the right, without exposing the information detail. Clear? So what exactly, if there is an unhandled exception in our ASP.NET Core application, then what ASP.NET Core internally do is, it is going to check on which environment the application is currently running. If the environment is development, then it is going to show a detailed exception information. Means it is going to display a page where it is going to show the what is the reason for the exception, where exactly the exception is caused, which statement is causing the exception. A completely picture it is going to give you. But if it is not the development environment, then what exactly it is going to do? If it is not a development environment, right? Right? If it is not a development environment, then what exactly it is going to do? It is going to give a generic 500 internal server page without exposing any right? Without exposing the exception information. Clear, guys? This is the default behavior. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let us see some examples so that you will get the clarity. Right. So what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to create one map get endpoint. Right. So I'm going to work with the same example now. Now what I'm writing here, I'm creating one endpoint map get. So when the application run for the root URL, this endpoint is going to be executed. So what I have done here, I'm writing some statement, and here you can see I have not written any try catch block. So basically, I want to show you what will happen when the runtime exception is going to be thrown. So in this case, you can say this is my first number, second number is 0. So at this point, right, when the statement is going to execute, it is going to give one runtime exception. So as we know, what is the basic fundamental rule of exception handling? Whenever an exception is thrown, from there only the program execution stops and it is going to display the exception page, right? That is what the basic fundamental rule. See, so what exactly it means? If there is an exception in line number 16, then from line number 17 onwards, these statements are never going to be executed. If we are writing some try-catch block, that is fine. Unhandled exception means program execution will stop from there only by showing the exception information. So in this case, right, currently it is going to throw the exception, and we have not written any try-catch block, means this is going to be one unhandled exception. And currently, on which environment the application is running? Guys, tell me.
Development.
Development.
So if there is an unhandled exception, if the environment is development, then what exactly it is going to give? It is going to display a detailed exception information. So let us see whether it is giving the detailed exception information or not. Am I getting a detailed exception information?
Yes.
Yes. To understand this thing, right, currently you will not understand all these right tabs. You can see there are 5 tabs: stack, query, cookies, header, and route. So in this case, the stack tab is the most right important one for us. Not only stack, every tag is important, but mostly by default, the stack tab is going to be displayed, which is going to give you information, right? What is the class name? So what is the class name means what? So in this case, guys, tell me what is the class name? Class name means the fully qualified name. So by looking at this name, so can anybody tell me what is the class name? First core web application, this is the namespace, and this is the class name. So now go to the first core web application. So this is the first core web application namespace, and this is the class name. That means within this class name, the exception is causing. Now, coming to the last part here, you can say program.cs class file. Is this class belongs to program.cs class file? Yes. Within this class, is there any main method? Yes, main method is there. So within this main method, the exception is causing. So which statement causing the exception? This is the statement which is causing the exception. What is the line number? Line number is 16. Now come to the project. So is this the line number which is causing the exception? Yes, this is the line number which is causing the exception. Now, if you want to see what is the previous statement and what is the next statement, you can click on this plus and the right plus minus button. So if you click on the plus minus button, previous statement and the next followed statement, they are also going to be displayed. So this is the start tab, which is going to give a detailed information about the file name, about the class name, about the method name, about the statement and the line number, right, which causes the exception. Clear?
Yes.
Right. So how many of you guys know what do you mean by query string?
If you are setting
Passing some parameter in your
So in the URL, if I'm writing a question mark and if I'm passing some data in the form of a key value pair, right? So this is nothing but your query string. So after the question mark, if I'm sending any information in the form of a key value pair, then this is nothing but our query string. So what exactly the second parameter telling, right? The exception what you are getting, is this exception because of some query parameter? If yes, then those query parameter information it is going to display. Even though, right, if you are sending any query string, that query string also going to be displayed here. And if you need to have a look whether the exception what I'm getting is is that because of the query string parameter. Clear, guys? What is the use of this query tab? It is going to display any query string value you have passed as part of the request, so that you can have a look and you can check whether the issue is because of the query string. Clear, guys? Currently we are not passing anything, so the query string is going to be empty. Clear or not? We'll see, right? As you progress, definitely I'm going to show you query string. Definitely I'm going to show you cookies. Currently you can see cookies is there. Cookies means, right, they are going to, cookies means they are small file which is going to be stored on the browser machine, which is also going to store some data in the form of a key value pair. And the browser is going to send those data, right, to the server in each and every request. So whatever the cookie information the browser is sending to the server, is the issue because of the cookies? If yes, then those information it is going to display here. Similarly, header. means this header tab, it is going to contain all the request and response header, right? Whatever the request header sent by the client, whatever the response header sent by the server, right? All the header information, it is going to store inside this headers tab. Then you need to check, right, whether whatever the issue, right, is this issue is related to some of the header. If yes, right, if yes, then just go to the headers tab and identify what went wrong. Any key I'm passing which is wrong, any header value what I'm passing, is that wrong? For example, if you are getting some authentication or authenticated issue, then in that case you will see that authenticated information here. So whatever credential I'm passing, that is invalid. That is the reason why I'm getting authenticated error. So in that case, you can go ahead and check any authorization header is there, whether the token is valid or invalid. Those things you need to check. Routing means what, right? It is going to store the content, right? Whatever the endpoint you are trying to access, whether what is the pattern, what is the method type, right? Any route value you are passing, route value and right corresponding value are different. For example, if I'm sending, right, something like this, so this is going to be a route value, right? So this is right. Currently, it is not working. Okay, let me do something. Right here, what I'm doing, I'm taking name. Right, so I think I have discussed this thing right in my previous session. Okay, let me from take there. Right, so this is the method what I've taken. Right, so what I can do is right now. So it's you can see whatever value I'm passing, this is nothing but your route value, right? So that is what it is displaying here, right? So basically, any right, for example here, right? Suppose I'm going to pass something like this question mark. What is the name, right? This is going to be name. Name equals I'm passing some text. So in this case, you can see that this is a core string. So after question mark means this is a core string. So in this case, the point that what you need to remember, right? Whatever core string I'm passing, that is coming in the core tab. Whatever right routing data I'm passing, that will come here, right? Even this is also considering this is as a route data, and any header, right? Request and response header, cookies information. This so core string parameter values will come in the core tab. Cookies will come in the cookies tab. All the request and response header are coming in the header tab. Routing or route data, right? Whatever it is expecting, right? That is coming in the route tab. But this tag tab, it is the most important one, which is going to display or which is going to give you what went wrong in your application code. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Right, so all this, right, so core string, cookies, header, routing, right? So once you start the MVC and web API application, we'll discuss this, right? What I can say, tabs in more detail. So for now, just remember these are the different tabs, right? By looking at this tab, we can identify what went wrong, right, to our application. Clear? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right now. Now that is fine, but what is my requirement, right? So my requirement, this is working fine. But in this case, right now, right, if I access the page, then I will see the exception information. That is fine. So it is working now. What I'm doing here, I'm changing the environment, right? HTTPS environment to production, or you can say staging, STHEING. So I'm changing the HTTPS environment to staging. And currently I'm launching the application using HTTPS. So in this case, if the environment is a right production, right, not development currently, so whatever the changes I have done, so is this a development environment? No. So if it is not the development environment, then it is not going to expose the exception information. Right now run the application and see, am I getting any exception information, or I'm getting a generic 50500 error page?
Generic.
So this is why it is providing this generic error page, because exposing the sensitive exception information on the production environment to the client is not a good programming practice. That is the reason why by default ASP.NET Core what exactly does, whenever there is an unhandled exception, if the environment is development, it is displaying this detailed exception information. Other than development, it is going to display a generic error page. Now what is my requirement? My requirement, I don't care, right, whether this is the development environment or production environment, or whether it is going to be a, right, what I can say, staging environment. Anytime some exception occur, I want to expose my sensitive information to anyone. Then if that is your requirement, then what you need to do, you have to use one middleware component called use developer exception page middleware component. So this, once you configure this middleware component, guys, remember, if you are using this one, this should be your, right, this should be registered as early as possible. So you should not register this component right after map-get. It should be the first component, right, registered into your application processing pipeline. So with this middleware component, right, what will happen? Now, whenever I run the application, right, then what will happen? Now, irrespective of the environment, whether it is production, development, staging, any unhandled exception means that error page is going to be displayed. Right now, we are in the right staging environment. Let me run the application and see whether I'm getting the data or not. Yes, I'm getting the data in the staging environment also. So this is not a good programming practice. So you should not expose this sensitive information to the client. So what we generally write, mostly what is the best programming approach? The best programming approach is check the environment. If it is environment, if the environment is right development, then only display the right exception page, right? So how you can check the environment? App dot environment dot is development. If the environment is development, then only go ahead and display this error message. If the environment is other than development, then display a, right, what I can say, generic custom error page. How to create that generic error custom page, we will see in our coming session. Generic custom error page, right? That's what we need to display. So if it is development environment, we are developing the application, we need to investigate, right, what went wrong. For that purpose, we need the complete exception detail. But on the production, the client is consuming these things, right? You just tell me, right? You just tell me, right? Okay, let me run the application. So not in this environment. So what I need to do, I need to use IIS Express. So in this case, right? So this information, right? If a client is a very sensitive developer hacker, then you can try to hack your application. Secondly, whatever page I'm showing, right? Is these things are going to be understood by a common layman? Guys,
No.
is
No,
this
no.
No.
So for that purpose, what we need to do, we need to create a custom error page, which is going to display something went wrong, right, in the application. Please try after some time. If you're persisting with this issue again and again, please come, right, please come connect with this email ID or whatever mobile number, right, whatever support you are providing, that message you can provide. But you just tell me, if the user is a hacker, Is they going to get enough information to hack your application by looking at this information? So this is not that difficult. But think about the scenario where it is going to expose the database table name, column table, right? All the columns, right? Whatever, right? Very sensitive information. If they are exposing, definitely it will make a loophole, right, for your application to be hacked by the hacker. So we should not display this page in the production. How to display a generic error page? That what we are going to discuss in our coming session. So what is the best practices? Best practices is check the environment and accordingly set the right use developer exception page middleware component. Clear, guys?
Yeah.
Sir,
Okay.
here this detailed explanation of the exception will come only in development environment, you said, right? So
So it's not only development environment. We should show this only in the development environment, not on the production. If I put this statement outside this one, right, then it is coming for everyone, irrespective of the environment,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Anyone
So
can see that.
if we did not put this one, so by default behavior for staging and production, we can't see the detailed error, right?
Yes. Sorry.
So if that is the case, if we wanted to put any custom exception page, can we create instead of if condition, we can create a not if it is not development environment, we can set that one, right? Then why we should use this app.use development exception page?
Sorry, I'm not getting your question. Can you please repeat?
No, you said in developer environment, we don't need to write this use developer exception page. By default, it will give the detailed page, right? Detailed exception page.
Right.
And in staging and production, you said it won't give the proper explanation. So
Right.
we want to create some custom error page. If that
Right.
is the behavior, if that is the default behavior, then again, why we should put this if and
So in that case, what you need to do, you can write something like this.
yeah, that's what I'm asking.
That is one. This is a common logic, right? That you once you understand this thing, right, it is up to you, right? How you are going to manage the thing. Right. So with
Okay.
these changes, if you are running the application in a development environment, that detailed exception page is going to be displayed, right? So for example, you can see now if I'm going to run the application in other than development environment, then that detailed page is not going to display. It is going to display this generic error page. This is your
Yes.
business logic, right? You understand, right? First of all, if I'm not writing this thing, what is the common behavior? That what we have discussed. Now it is up to you how you are writing this statement.
Yeah, that's why I asked you like why it should check the condition.
It is not mandatory, right? Because that
Okay.
is the different behavior. No need to write that again, right? But as a developer, if you want to make sure, right? No, I am the developer. I need to enable that middleware component. No issue. You can write that update environment at each development and write that statement, but not necessary. Why? Because
Okay.
that is automatically right provided by Visual Studio. I
Understood.
mean, right framework, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a
Now,
question.
yes, please.
So in the real-time environment, like a real-time project, there are many pages will be there, right? So
Yes.
where
Okay,
where we are
let me give you the answer. Whatever your question, I understand. So
got
as
it.
we progress, right? As we progress, I'm going to show you based on the status code how you can display different error pages. If 404, I need to give a error page which is going to display the 404 generic message. If it is 500 error page, I need to give a error page which is going to display 500 error page, right? That means based on the status code, it is also possible, right? We are going to display write some generic error pages based on the status code. That is possible,
Yeah.
and definitely
So
that is what we are also going to discuss.
yeah, one
That is
more
in
question,
the
sir. Yeah, I got your answer. So so globally, any configuration we need to do and only one time using, no need to
One time configuration, you do not need to do anything special. How to implement that in the right real time scenario, I'm going to show you this thing, right? Practical,
thank
I'm
you.
going to based on the status code. So before asking your question, I give the answer because I know this is the real time scenario that what we need to develop. Clear? I will show you this thing practical. No
Thank
worry.
you.
Yes. Next question, please. If anybody have.
Sir, my question is not related to this exception page. This is related to the web application. Can you go to definition on web application?
This web application.
Yeah, go to definition. So this is sealed class. So
Yes.
sir, then why didn't we create the object of this class and then we can invoke our method?
So you just tell me what is the use of a sealed class?
Sealed class like when we don't want further inheritance of this class.
That is the reason why you cannot create any class which is inherited for the right from this web application. That is the reason why they make this as a class sealed. So
Right,
what is
right. Yeah, my question is, can you go back again to the program class?
okay?
Yeah. So here we are directly calling our create builder method as web application dot create builder. So first we could have created the object of web application, like web application w
You
is
just
equal
tell
to
me. You just tell me. This create builder method. It is a static method or a non-static method.
okay, this is a static method.
So static method means do you need any instance or you can call them directly.
Okay.
So
And
this is a static method.
what about web application? That is not static, right? Web application that is public. That is
So
sealed.
is that matter? Is that matter? So what is your requirement? You want to create an instance of web application builder.
Yeah.
That instance is going to be created by this create builder method. And this
Mhm.
create builder method is a static method inside this class. As this see, a class means what? Inside a class, is it mandatory that you can create only static member? You can
No.
create only non-static member.
Yeah,
If you
both.
create all the member as static, then only you need to mark the class as static.
Right,
If
right.
the class contains some static plus non-static, can I mark the class as static?
No.
So that is the reason why they are
Okay.
not marking this class
Okay.
as static. Why still? Because no further inheritance is possible. You
Okay.
cannot inherit, create a class which is going to inherit from this class, right?
Okay.
Inside this class, you can see these are static member or a non-static member.
Non-static.
Non-static.
So these are static member or a non-static member.
Static. Static.
So you
Okay.
just tell me why they have
Static members.
yeah. So if a class containing both static and non-static means the class must be non-static. If contains only static member, then only you need to consider creating that class as a static class.
Okay. So
Yeah.
static members will be called as class name dot method name.
Obviously, this is the
Right,
basic
right.
concept.
Right, right.
Clear, guys?
Yes.
Any further question, guys? The next session, right, on Monday, right? And before that session, right, joining that session, please do install, right, SQL Server on your machine. It's not only SQL Server or but SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server 19 is fine, right? 17 is fine. Any version is fine, right? That is not important, right? But make sure SQL Server is up and running on your machine, right? Because right, entity framework core means completely it is going to be on database. And what database we are going to use? SQL Server database. Please make sure this is installed because right for the next 2 weeks at least 2 to 3 weeks right maximum we are going to discuss this entity framework core concept and which is very important right from the right the development point of view right most of the time we are going to communicate with the database and when there is a database interaction right entity framework is definitely a mandatory thing. So we'll start with entity framework core. Later, I will show you how to use Dapper. Finally, we will end with ADO.NET Core. But most of the time, we are going to discuss right the application using Entity Framework. So, whatever the chapters I have provided in ASP.NET Core Basics, all these chapters I have covered success completely. Right? Anything I have missed? No, I don't think I have missed anything. So, whatever the number of chapters I have provided, I have discussed. Right? So, from Monday, we are going to start Entity Framework Core. And right, whatever the 50 number of chapters I have provided, all these things I am going to discuss one by one, chapter by chapter. Definitely, it is going to take more time, but worth time, right? So you will learn many concepts, right? Even right, whatever entity framework concept you learn, right? In ASP.NET Framework, or even if you know some Entity Framework core concept, once you start discussing the concept, then you will see what is the right depth, right in-depth concept you are learning here, right? So, and from there, right, we are going to start. And once Entity Framework core concept completed, then we can only start developing the web application and MVC application. First of all, we will understand the core concept of Entity Framework core, how it is working, how the SQL statements are being generated, what is the DB context class, what are the DB set properties, how the tables are created, how the columns are mapped to the properties, what are the default convention, how we can overcome these conventions using data annotation as well as using Fluent API, right? How we can implement inheritance relationship, what is to mean by TPT, TPC and TPH, right? What do you mean by eager loading, lazy loading and explicit loading, how to implement, right, asynchronous programming with Entity Framework, or what do you mean by shadow properties, right? What do you mean by entity states? What do you mean by database migration, right? And also I'm going to discuss how to perform bulk insert, update and delete operation using entity framework or method. Why they are not robust? What is the best solution? What is the right other right third party libraries we need to use? How to use them to consume, right? I mean how to perform bulk operation, right? All these things we are going to discuss. I'm also going to discuss, right, how to implement one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, understanding, right, how you can decide what should be the relationship between two entities, how you can implement this relationship, right, where to create the primary key, where to create the foreign key, how to create the primary key and the foreign key, how to create a composite primary key, how to create a composite foreign key, right? What do you mean by connected entities? What do you mean by disconnected entities? What do you mean by global query filter, right? Everything I'm going to discuss, right? And it is mandatory. Why? Because right, once you understand the database part, right, you can consider your 30% right job is done. Because most of the time, whatever we are going to do, we are going to do with the database. If the database, right, if you are very good at the designing the database or designing right the entities and understanding how to do operation, right, or you can say how to perform the database crowd operation with the database using entity framework code, means your job is done. Most of the time, that is what our main priority, or you can say main object. So that is what we are going to discuss, right, from Monday. Clear, guys?
Sir, I have installed older version 2008 R2. Will that work for this?
2008
R2.
Right, so why not you install the latest one? Because many new features, right? That is a merge statement, right? So these
Okay,
are the few things, right, which are not going to be right compatible with that version.
okay.
Because,
So
right,
you will work on 2019?
19 I'm going to work, but 17 is fine. But
Okay.
19, right? So whenever you are going to learn something, always try to install the latest version, because
Okay.
older
Okay.
concept plus the new concept you can easily achieve. If you are
Okay.
using older, the new concept you cannot do.
Okay.
Yeah. Clear, guys? Anyone having any question? Right? And from this, right, basic concept, you will get a few interview questions, right? Just to prepare yourself. What is the right? What do you mean by in-process hosting, out-of-process hosting? What is custom web server? What is the use of a long setting.json file? What do you mean by middleware components? What is the web root folder? What they are going to contain, right? So what, right? These are the few interview questions you might get, right? In ASP.NET Core. And this concept, whatever we discuss, it is not specific to any right ASP.NET Core framework like MVC, WebAPI, or RazorBase. It is the common thing, right? Any kind of a .NET application, right? .NET Core application you develop, these are the common things. Yes, this web root folder, what we have discussed, the static files, what right, this configure default pages, these are not available in Web API project, but rest of the things, right, they are going to be available. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right, and once entity framework core completed, then we'll start directly, right, after discussing few basic concept, we'll I'm trying to cover every concept with real-time applications, right? So real-time application means right at the end of this right course, definitely you will get right acquainted with a 5 to 6 real-time project, like you can say that employee portal, definitely that is a common,
library management system, hotel management system, hospital management system, CMS panel, as well as one e-commerce application, right? 5 to 6 real-time project experience I'm going to give you, right, at the end. So that, right, you will find it very, right, easy to, right, work with the real-time projects.
Sure,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah. So just to do practices and whatever we have discussed so far, just to do practices, right? And once this entity framework core concept completed, you will be in a good position, right, to start developing real-time project. Not only entity framework, right, and what I can also ask you guys, do some practices of a LinQ courage. Because if you are working with LinQ means, right, entity framework means what? You are working with LinQ courage as well. Right, so I have already given those who have already, right, joined the CSAP Telegram group, right? I have already provided the link to sessions. Just to go ahead and watch those sessions. This is very, very interesting, very, very important, right, from the development point of view whenever you are working with the entity framework. Thank you, guys. Anybody have any more question?
No, sir, we are good.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Right, and happy Diwali to all of you.
Thank you.
Happy Diwali.
Sunday.
Same to you.
Thank you, guys.